What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We have more off-season grades, the Pacific Division, part 5 of 6. Very quickly, subscribe if you haven't already across YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Comment on all our videos on YouTube. Help the algorithm love us back. Ratings and reviews on Apple. Written reviews along with the ratings go a long way. Ratings on Spotify help. Please follow us on all the socials at HardwoodKnocks on TikTok and Twitter, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. Support the show by purchasing our merch. The link to the store is in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube description. And if you've done all or most of those things and you're subscribed, consider recommending us. Share the episode, share the shorts and the TikToks that we're throwing out there. Any way to help us continue growing while we're in this like Twitter death spiral where it's hard to really get our podcast seen by new people outside of TikTok and YouTube. Grant, that was a sub 1 minute intro. How the hell are you doing?
I'm doing great. We just had a terrific gym shorts conversation offline, which will not mention any of the brands because we're not sponsored by them. And if the good people at companies X, Y, and Z want to sponsor us,
yeah, can we get some Viore sponsorships? Maybe a Gymshark, Ghost would be great if my energy drinks could be paid for. It turned into, we went from gym shorts to some pretty existential shit.
Yeah,
turned into a conversation about death.
As you do.
As a brief reminder, the criteria for anyone who gets mad, a C is average, is an average offseason. I'm not saying people are going to get mad, but please just take that into consideration. Grant, are you able to take us through our first team of the Pacific Division?
Yes, this is the Golden State Warriors. Price in my homer bias now because that's how it's going to go. The big move, traded Jordan Poole, Patrick Baldwin Jr., Ryan Rollins, a top 20 protected 2030 first rounder. A hilarious, great pick to trade. And a 2027 second to the Wizards for Chris Paul. Draymond Green is back on a 4-year, $100 million contract. Dario Saric and Corey Joseph are on board at the minimum. The Warriors drafted Brandon Pajemski at number 19 and Trace Jackson Davis at number 57. Jackson Davis is represented by Mike Dunleavy, the Golden State Warriors' new top executive's brother. So that's interesting. Dunleavy replaces Bob Myers, who... I don't know how much credit you give executives for team success, but I think fairly deserves a lot of it.
ESPN's Bob Myers.
Right. Bob Myers newly reemployed at ESPN. So Dunleavy in, Bob Myers out. It still seems like it's going to be kind of a collective decision-making body. Dante DiVincenzo is gone, signed with the Knicks. Ty Jerome gone, signed with the Cavs. JaMychal Green, Andre Iguodala, Anthony Lamb. As far as I know, all three remain unsigned. I think that's still the case. Iguodala may retire. I don't know if that's been officially stated yet, but I think that's the way things are pointing. Quite a bit of activity online and some, a little bit of everything with interesting draft picks, big trade, significant re-signing that seemed a little bit uncertain as far as Green goes. All told, I think this team is significantly better. This is a B+ for me. I am concerned about the Myers void and the Chris Paul fit. We can talk about any of that stuff, but B+ for me. Where are you on this Warriors offseason?
I'm pretty high on it too, and you're a bad Warriors fan, I think, if you support like the Chris Paul acquisition, and that's just like they gave up. If that first rounder conveys, I know you're saying, hey, you just signed Poole to this extension, you turn around and then have to give up a first round pick to get him. It's a fake for if you convey it, like something has gone incredibly right for you down the line. And I think that's a big deal. I think they played the Draymond Green extension right, clearly, by not giving him one. To end up at 4 years, $100 million is perfectly fine. There's a trade kicker. It escalates. That's like some stuff to consider. But I think that deal is, I don't think it's a home. I think it's just I think it's what Draymond Green could be worth over the next 4 years, which is absolutely perfect. It's just the question of how do you view the Paul deal? If you believed in Jordan Poole, then you're not going to like the Paul deal. I did not believe in Jordan Poole, and I think getting out of that contract without having to give up a top 19 first rounder is a big deal because Chris Paul can still play. And just my question, and I think it does impact how you view the offseason, unless you're like, oh, why haven't they signed Clay to an extension yet? Which I'm just not, I don't. If they sign him to an extension, it's probably because he's taking like massive pay cuts. I think they're going to play it like they did Green. Anyway, I like it. I really think Golden State, even dating back to the Kevin Durant era, I had put this in one of my articles, they have sucked on offense whenever Steph Curry is off the floor. There were certain lineups that had Kevin Durant without Curry that worked. I want to make that clear. Chris Paul is a million years old, But if you're willing to run pick and roll, slow things down in the half court a little bit more, he can steer you to a league average offense without Steph Curry on the floor. So my two questions are just, are they going to let him play pick and roll with, okay, who? Is it Draymond? Is it Jonathan Kuminga? It's probably not Dario Saric. So that's a question. And then what does it look like during the Steph and Chris Paul minutes? Is that going to be what you potentially close with? Or no, you're going to go with the dual big and Kevon Looney and Draymond Green? Without having the answers, I still think it was a very fair and measured, by the way, gamble to make. And so I went with an A- here.
Okay. I think those are the questions to ask. And it really, you could even distill it further to say, what role is Chris Paul willing to play? I think, because I don't really have any doubt that Steve Kerr will run pick and roll with Chris Paul. Like, if you have Chris Paul, like, what else are you doing? Right. You put the ball in his hands and he runs.
Same thing with James Wiseman.
Well, right. Except this time there's the guy who's making the decisions can handle it. I think basically, if the theory is that Chris Paul is willing to come off the bench and is willing to go like God knows how long between getting to close, because I don't think he makes a lot of sense against many teams as a closer. If he's willing to just embrace that role, this should work, because Paul is going to, I mean, the Warriors would have killed to be break even in the non-Steph minutes, for years and years and years. And I think it's not a big ask to have Chris Paul and some combination of reserves and starters play break even basketball for the beginning of the second quarter and the beginning of the fourth, which, is when Steph typically rests. That has changed some over the years, but that's the idea. And the theory of this team just, it makes much more sense without Poole, because now all of your biggest problems, turnovers being a huge one, late game decision-making being another. If you've got Paul to sort of mitigate that, as long as he's willing to play the role that I think makes the most sense for the team, maybe this should be an A- for me. The Myers thing.
Yeah, I don't know how to view that. It's like,
I don't
was
either.
there enough money to offer him and they didn't? It doesn't sound like it.
It seems like he was just kind of burnt, which if you've been with this team over the years, like there have been some like thorny situations, like it's been hard to deal with. So I don't begrudge him that at all. I just wonder, you never know how much elite executive matters, especially in a front office that's like getting input from, prides itself on collaborative decision-making. You don't know what one guy really means. And the fact that they got the Green Deal done without Myers really being super involved, it seemed like that's a positive, I think.
Yeah.
I think if I were moving this grade, I'd move it up. Feels like B+ is probably maybe a bit of an undersell, but there are uncertainties, I guess, is where I'd leave it.
And I think, the B+ is fine. And also, I also weighted, like, it's clear that Chris Paul is a more, in theory, attractive human trade exception than Jordan Poole. And so if the Warriors really wanted to make a bigger swing and look at moving Moody and Kuminga or some of the picks that they can still move later in the season when they have a better idea of who they are or who's available, I think that Chris Paul's salary and his contract, the way it's set up, makes it easier to do that, which absolutely matters. Did you have any thoughts on the Pods pick?
Well, he couldn't shoot it at all in summer league. I don't know how much weight you put into that, because he did shoot it fine in college. I just as a departure from let's take some shots on really good athletes, Wiseman, Kuminga, Moody's not quite the same, or really highly regarded high school prospects like Patrick Baldwin Jr. was a ridiculously highly rated high school prospect, got hurt, flamed out. I think he still may be a decent NBA player because he can shoot it. Podziemski is like the complete opposite, where he's kind of someone that just figures out how to win, makes the right passes, like that kind of thing. If he can't score, either in the lane with his floaters or make open shots, then I don't know how much he helps. But he is like, I can understand how the Warriors would justify a player like him who has like high IQ and understands how to, all the intangible stuff, right? I wouldn't count on him to help, almost at all as a rookie, just because one, he's a rookie, and two, I think athletically he might have some trouble just kind of adjusting. But yeah, I like he went to Santa Clara. I feel like we should have started with that disclaimer. So
if listeners don't know, that is Grant's alma mater.
So I favor him. I support him. I mean, he went to, I can't think of anyone other than Jalen Williams that went there. So, other than like one of my 5 favorite players ever.
I was about to say, like,
so yeah, I think I wouldn't count on him, but I like the pick in theory. I guess I'd put it that way.
I don't know enough about him to care or not. I just don't think there was no one drafted after him. I'm like, oh, fuck, like the Warriors should have went that direction.
I mean, Cam Whitmore went right after him. That would be a very
just for
like
what this team needs is like you just traded Jordan Poole and now we're gonna like do the Cam Whitmore experience here. So
and we're not sure about Jonathan Kuminga yet. I mean, he's still ridiculous potential, but now we're getting a little deep into the career and it hasn't happened yet. So yeah, I get it.
Are you?
You want to do the Clippers?
Yeah, let's move on to the Clippers, who did a shit ton of nothing. So they waived Eric Gordon, and it saved them 9 figures in their tax bill. They re-signed Russell Westbrook to a 2-year deal using non-bird rights with a player option for 24-25. They re-signed Mason Plumlee to a 1-year, $5 million deal. They drafted Kobe Brown at number 30. They drafted Jordan Miller at number 48 and signed him to a 2-way contract. And they signed Musa Diabite to a 2-way contract as well. The things that are kind of hanging over this team that I think, unless I've missed anything already, is the James Harden trade rumors. He only wants to go there. The Clippers apparently don't want to include Terance Mann. And then both Kawhi and Paul George are extension eligible. I don't know where you ended up as a grade. I'm actually giving them a higher one than I would have if they extended these guys, because I respect just not defaulting to, they just haven't played enough together. Like there's a discussion to be had about the way we talk about load management and injuries with the Clippers, because whenever we talk about it with other players, it does feel like, look, the teams are making this decision. But when it's Kawhi and PG, it's always framed almost as if they're the ones that are actively deciding not to play, which feels a little egregious. But then I'm like, is this a smoke fire situation? So yeah. I think it's good they didn't sign them to an extension yet, unless they were completely favorable team terms, because they just don't know that these guys are going to be available together when it matters most.
I mean, I would push back. I think we do know whether they're going to be available. And the answer is they will not, because they just haven't been. So yeah, no, we've been doing this too long together, I think, or we're guilty of groupthink. My grade's a C+, which is not like through the roof or anything, but it would be lower if they had max extended either of those guys. Just because you can't in good conscience commit whatever it would be, 4 more years, or even, 3+1 or whatever, at ridiculous rates for guys that they just don't play. You can't do it. And honestly, I was going to ask you, is your grade higher or lower if Harden is a part of this team? I mean, it depends on the package, but
well, because of what they could give up, is there really a bad, like if they're trading Paul George, we can get into it, but is there a bad James Harden package that they could wind up giving?
I mean, probably not. It would be more based on the idea that just over the last several years, James Harden has just kind of left places worse than he found them. So, we're not, and we've talked about this with Kyrie a lot too. It's just like, do you want to be in the James Harden business for any reason? And now that's like a real question, I think. I mean, James Harden was really good last year. I mean, offensively, he had a very good season. He's to that point now where for me, it's almost like the circumstances have to be really specific and well-tailored for me to even entertain the idea of him being on my team, because of what that means. Like, maybe it's different because you have Kawhi and you have Paul George, but you had Joel Embiid. Harden wants to play a certain way. You're going to get certain things from him. You're definitely not going to get certain things from him. And it's not like he can transition gracefully into a smaller, he's like the least scalable guy in some senses.
I think he might be the least scalable player in the league. Not to say he doesn't, the Sixers were great with him. The Nets were great with him. The Rockets were great with him, but like we've yet to see him. Joel Embiid's probably the closest he's come to taking a step back. And that was still more your turn, my turn stuff. Then yes, I know he upped his catch and shoot percentage a little bit, but this is not someone who's proven that they can play off the ball a ton or is necessarily willing to do that. They need the playmaking. I'm concerned with how slow they would play, but they have Russ for that. And look, Terance Mann injects pace. They don't use him enough as it is. Yeah, and so if that's what you have to give up, I'm just doing it. I will say, you still make the trade, but I guess like Russ and James Harden are still cool.
Well, yeah. I mean, the fact that that's like 4th or 5th down the list of questions you have, and that's a significant one, it says a lot about kind of the shit that you're in for if you put this player on this team. I think I do it too, just because what is it ultimately going to, it's like Terance Mann is the deal breaker. We both like him a lot, but really like you could, again, I was talking about the specific circumstances with respect to Harden. These are kind of the circumstances where the idea would be you lighten the load on Kawhi and Paul George and having two other, really established playmaking wings, just that can both defend like that. Maybe this is pretty close to like how you would want your situation to be to accommodate James Harden. Doesn't answer any of the playoff questions, and it doesn't answer any of the durability questions, which he also has, not to the degree of the other two guys.
Between the three of them, it's like, oh, we'll get
he's a rock.
Two of them will be available in the playoffs, right? There's also something uniquely terrifying about all three of those guys just heading to free agency in the same offseason, probably.
Well, that too. I was thinking from the coach's perspective, having to deal with like the just alphas all over the place. You didn't give a grade. I was a C+. Where are you on this?
I went with a C just because I don't know what they did that's above average. I guess if you want to say the Russ deal, but I also kind of assume like, well, this is the early bird right situation where they're just going to have to pay him later. I think bringing him back was good. Mason Plumlee, I'm indifferent to. Like, I don't know if you could you gotten a better big for that price point. I mean, I like Bismack Biyombo better, and he's still floating around unsigned, but you can't ding him for it. It's just everything they acted. And the Eric Gordon stuff, yes, you would keep Eric Gordon, but when it's going to cost you $200 million to have Eric Gordon, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. And so it's just like, yes, it's not my money, so they should have kept him because he was really important. But I'm not going to like give them an extra demerit because they didn't want to pay $150 million. Like they wanted to say, they shouldn't say Eric Gordon didn't drive up the price tag. They could have looked for, that's something you could get into. Could they have been more aggressive in finding a new home for like Marcus Morris and then been able to keep Eric Gordon? Like, was there some sort of compensation? Like, he's on an expiring contract. Like, you couldn't have done something with OKC or Detroit or the Spurs or something. So just a C. Nothing they did this offseason impressed me. But there's also a level of incomplete because of the James Harden trade rumors.
Yeah. I think I went C+ just because they didn't immediately extend Kawhi and Paul George.
And that matters. That kind of kept them above water for me, though, because like, what else did they do? I guess you really have to like the Russ deal. I can't bring myself. It was an average. They couldn't do a lot, but they didn't do anything that you look at and go, oh, wow, like, nice job. And if the best thing they did was not sign their two best players to extensions, it's like, all right, like, what is the bar here?
Yeah. All right. Let's hit the other LA team. I think I have them. So I'm glad I have your sheet here too, because I did not have the Anthony Davis extension on here. 3 years, $177.1 million, goes through his age 34 season, and he's got a player option on 27-28. In addition to that, got Austin Reaves back for 4 years, $53.8 million with a player option on the last year there. Just, I mean, one of my favorite deals of the offseason. I think you're there with me. Rui Hachimura for 3 years and 51. Don't love it as much. Not terrible. Signed D'Angelo Russell for 2 years and $36 million with a player option. I think critically, he doesn't have veto rights on a trade. So
him giving that up was a big deal.
That's a big win, I think. Gabe Vincent on board from Miami for 3 years and 33. Taurean Prince, late of the Timberwolves for a year and $4.5 million. Jackson Hayes and Cam Reddish for the minimum. Outgoing Dennis Schroeder, Troy Brown Jr., Malik Beasley, Lonnie Walker IV, and Mo Bamba. Drafted Jalen Hood-Schifino at 17 and Maxwell Lewis at 40. I'm trying to see if I missed anything else. I think that's, other than some later draft selling and buying picks, I think that's pretty much it.
They clearly like Maxwell Lewis, who was at number 40. Look, this was a very good offseason for the Lakers. I'm mad at other NBA teams, as I mentioned, probably on multiple podcasts, that they didn't make them pay more for Austin Reaves. I'm fine with the D'Angelo Russell deal that's built to be moved. I know there's the player option on it, but he can't veto a trade. It's just such a low number in the current. Like it's maybe 12% of the salary cap next summer. So, and look, he's still like, he had an efficient scoring season kind of before he came to LA. And so there might be teams that just value that. I gave them an A-, kind of spoiling the lead here. I don't know what move there wasn't to like, other than I would not have taken Jalen Hood-Schifino. Like, you need someone. I know we're talking about rookies on a team that maybe wouldn't play them. And I know he gives you like maybe that caps lock wing defender, but this team needs spacing. And I thought the Taurean Prince deal was great. Austin Reaves is going to give you some of that, but you're still just not chock full of, oh, we have good shooters. And if you're going to try it all to play Anthony Davis with another big, Gabe Vincent's considered 3-and-D, but we've seen his 3-point percentage slump a little bit. Rui Hachimura is not that guy. I also considered a B+ because I don't love the Rui Hachimura deal.
Agree.
Very good offseason for the Lakers, but I just thought that was like, who was giving him that type of money? And you're banking a lot on what you saw kind of in the later season and during the playoffs. And even that is just like, there's a clear ceiling on that dude. Is he a part of your most important lineups? And the answer is just going to be no, most likely. But the value they got for like Gabe Vincent at Austin Reaves, A++ deal, the Taurean Prince, absolute home run. So just the Jalen Hood Schifino stuff just makes it a little, I take issue with that more than the Rui deal, because at least we've seen like, okay, Rui kind of works as a play finisher. And I would have liked to see the Lakers been like, well, let's either move up like, or out of this spot entirely. Not that they needed to acquire a veteran, or because they've just rolled the dice on, they were never going to be a Cam Whitmore team. That's fair. But like Jaime Jaquez feels like he would have made more sense. Pods even went to the Warriors we just talked about. I actually even would have looked at Noah Clowney here, just as sort of like a rim protecting stretch big. Is he able to fit with AD? Why was Chris Murray not on their radar? And I think even Olivier Maxence Prosper is just someone who, or even Marcus Sasser. I don't really particularly like him, but like they were just better shooters on the board. And in Omax's case, not a much better shooter. I trust his jump shot long term, but like someone who still would have brought you then defensive value as well.
Yeah. I think generally speaking, the Hood Schifino pick was pretty widely panned by, especially draft evaluators that are more analytically based. So, I mean, I guess I'm an A- too. I knocked it down, I think, more for the Hachimura deal that I didn't really love. I would just add, though, I agree with everything you said. I would add that, if you're going to sign guys for the minimum and you're not sure you're going to play them, but if you do, you might only ask them to do one or two things. I love Jackson Hayes and Cam Reddish as just like, let's see, maybe Jackson Hayes as like a fourth big, or he might be higher than that in the rotation. Like there's still obvious like physical talent with both of those guys, and they mostly haven't been on good teams. And I think for someone like Reddish, like there have been enough stops now to where it's like, it's definitely not them. It's you. Like you're not delivering. But in terms of just guys with physical tools for the minimum on a team that, doesn't have to play them, I think those are the kind of flyers I like. So that didn't really meaningfully affect the grade, but that's just another reason that this was a solid to very solid offseason for the Lakers.
I did see some skepticism about the Anthony Davis extension, and I didn't understand it. Just like, yeah, do you want to potentially pay him $63.4 million, 34% of the cap at age 34? Maybe not, but like, you can't get rid of him. Like you need a pole star for if and when LeBron leaves or actually kind of falls off, which is just like, yeah, he's not the same player he was, but like age 38 LeBron, age 39 LeBron, still really good.
Yeah.
That's not always going to be the case, or he's not always going to be there. And the other thing, had you waited, like the fact that he had that ETO and the way it was structured, he couldn't get a longer deal. And so the fact that it's only 3 years, like now you're not paying him into his age 35 season. And had you waited for him to get into free agency, like you might have had to pay him into his age 36 season. So I thought that was just a no-brainer for them. And it keeps them a little bit more flexible, also ensuring like, well, we do still kind of have this direction with Austin Reaves, with Anthony Davis post LeBron.
Yeah, I think it's just the going rate for Anthony Davis, who like, I'm going to Bill Simmons this right now and say like, when he's at his best, he's one of the like 5 to 8 best players in the league. And if that happens to be in the playoffs, which is all the Lakers care about, then that's worth it. And that's just
nothing he does anymore. It's just like, yeah, he can cover a lot of ground on defense, but he's not as explosive as he once was on offense. Like his game, if he's actually on the court, his availability might not age well, but his game should be fine, right?
He's going to slow down and still be a dominant rim protector. Like that's just, as he fades, he's still going to have like an elite skill or two. And it just, this is what it costs to keep Anthony Davis. That's either you do this or you don't keep Anthony Davis. That's just how it works.
I just don't see how, even if you don't think the Lakers got a lot better, I don't know how you dislike their offseason. It's just where I'm at.
Agree.
Let's move on to the Phoenix Suns. If you want to go grab like a caffeine beverage or something while I go through this for like 8 hours. They dismissed Monty Williams. They hired Frank Vogel. They traded Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, 4 first-round swaps, 4 second-rounders, and cash for Bradley Beal, Jordan Goodwin, and Isaiah Todd. They then traded Isaiah Todd, a least favorable 24 first-round swap and a least favorable 2030 first-round swap to Memphis for second-round picks in 2028 and 2029, both of which are Memphis's own picks for anyone that might care about that. They traded Cameron Payne, New Orleans' 2025 second round pick, and cash to San Antonio for a top 54 protected second rounder, so a fake second. They created a $6.5 million traded player exception. They signed Eric Gordon, Josh Okogie, Keita Bates-Diop, Yuta Watanabe, Drew Eubanks, and Damian Lee to 2-year minimum deals with player options on the second season. They signed Bol Bol and Chimeze Metu to 1-year minimums. They signed number 52 to Mani Kamara to a 4-year, $7.6 million deal. Only 1 season is guaranteed. They also signed Udoka Azubuike and Saban Lee to 2-way contracts. Just some other housekeeping notes here. Jock Landale signed with Houston for 4 years and $32 million. Only 1 season of that was guaranteed. Torrey Craig signed with Chicago for 2 years and $5 million. Bismack Biyombo remains unsigned, and I believe the Suns still have their early bird rights on him, that they did not announce him. There's the DeAndre Ayton speculation, if you want to consider that. And then also, I don't know how much this factors in for you. They made Kevin Young one of the highest paid non-head coaches in the NBA.
That's a lot.
I'm curious as to whether you've come around on the Bradley Beal. That's the biggest thing they did this offseason, unless you think firing Monty Williams was as big. I know you thought it was riskier than I did. Have you come around to the idea, like, if you have a problem with that trade, your real problem was with the Kevin Durant trade, which has no bearing on this offseason? Because look at the value they gave up. 4 seconds, 4 swaps, an expiring contract, and Landry Shamet, essentially. For someone who has an all-NBA ceiling, you are not going to get better value for what they gave up. And you didn't obliterate your depth with that trade. You gave up 2 rotation players for 1 better rotation player.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they just hit like 7 consecutive home runs on their minimums has changed my evaluation a lot, actually. Because my knock really was, and it's basic stuff. Like, I don't think Bradley Beal is a positive value player at that contract. It's just like, he's not good enough to justify what they're paying him. But then it's like, the Suns don't care. They're already, they're trying to win a title, and he gives them a better chance to do that than fucking Landry Shamet and Chris Paul and like $3.5 million and all those picks, right? So kudos to the Suns for being very goal oriented. So the other questions I had were like, do you need a third guy that's basically a primary shot creator if you have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant? And there was some pushback that I saw that was like, well, that kind of was their problem in the playoffs, is it was those 2 guys and nobody else could do anything. So fair points. I take that. I think ultimately I have gotten, I'm giving the Suns an A. So like a flat A. So yeah, obviously I've come around on it. I think the Beal acquisition in conjunction with all the other stuff they did, and I to your point, like the Kevin Young thing, I think that's a little fraught when you really pay an assistant that the players really like a lot
for the head coach. Yeah,
that's a little fraught. But like, also, I love it when teams are willing to spend extravagantly on stuff that isn't affected by the salary cap. So ultimately, I like that. And, it seemed like Monty Williams had kind of lost the locker room a little bit. So, and Frank Vogel has won a title and is a good defensive coach and
might be better at reaching DeAndre Ayton than Monty Williams.
Yeah, right. That relationship seemed broken between Ayton and Williams. And so even if all you want to do is rehab Ayton's value, maybe Vogel is just a better person to do that. So you can trade him. But yeah, this is an A to me. And it's weird that so much of it hinges on guys like Gordon and KBD and Eubanks and Watanabe. But it's just like, you should not be able to fill out a rotation so effectively with minimum salaries. And I can't really remember a team doing a better job of that. So yeah, it's an A. The Suns offseason was a rousing success, even if I had and still have some questions about the Beal thing.
The thing I went back and forth on was you kind of just punted on having any other playmakers on the roster by getting rid of Campaign. And there are 2 ways to look at it. Was Campaign going to be in their closing lineup? Absolutely not.
No.
And you still do have Eric Gordon, kind of like sort of a secondary guy there. The TPA might actually be more valuable to them this season than Cameron Payne. Yeah. So I didn't know where to land on that. But I will say, to then not use like really any of your minimums on like kind of a point guardy type, just to have that, knowing that these aren't the 3 most durable stars in the world, I went with an A-, just because it's the Kevin Young stuff. You mentioned it. It made me a little uneasy. I don't think there's a problem with it. I was, I don't want to use the word uninspired. I think Frank Vogel was kind of an unspectacular candidate to settle on, but wasn't it like Doc Rivers got like really far into that process or something too? So the fact that he might be able to reach DeAndre Ayton, and when there is defensive uncertainty kind of caked into here, it's like, okay, like Frank Vogel like gives you a very high defensive floor. And I think that that's really important. I'm just sort of like, when we're looking at the highest level of basketball, I don't think you did anything to hurt your championship chances by, it's not even getting rid of campaign, but by not using the minimum on, could this have been like a Corey Joseph team or could they have been a Reggie Jackson team? No,
Derek way out of their price range.
Right. So I'm just saying you didn't hurt it, but you did kind of just like, there's a little bit more risk here. Maybe the thought is, well, we'll just go out and get that player mid-season. That in conjunction with, and maybe he still comes back. Like, I really like Bismack Biyombo for this team. Why was he just not like kind of part of, like, do you think Drew Eubanks is better than Bismack Biyombo? I guess some people will. I think
so.
I guess it's like someone who can like cut through the lane, and I might even trust him switching a little bit more, just as at least as a straight up rim protector. These are very small quibbles, though. It was an A off season in some regard, not an A plus. Could have been an A minus. It was just somewhere in that range.
There you go. All right, that takes us to the Sacramento Kings, which I have here. So renegotiated and extended Domantas Sabonis. So his deal essentially is now 5 years for just under $215 million. Harrison Barnes is back 3 years, $54 million. Trey Lyles also back 2 years, $16. Alex Len is back as well for the minimum, and but Nerlens Noel also signed for the minimum. Signed Sasha Vezenkov for 3 years, $19.9 million with a team option on the third year. Signed Nehemiah Keita. Got Chris Duarte from the Pacers for just 2 future seconds. Not sure I would have believed that was possible a year ago. Traded Rashawn Holmes and number 24 to Dallas for cash. Got 34 from Boston for 38 and a 24 second. And they took Colby Jones at 34. Outgoing, Terance Davis, Chimezie Metu, PJ Dozier, and Matthew Dellavedova is unsigned. I will throw it to you before I reveal my grade. It's not a good one. So I would like to see what you have to say about the Kings offseason before I jump in.
So here's what's interesting is that when they made that Rashawn Holmes trade, it created this idea that they were gearing up for something just mega.
Mm-hmm.
It's disappointing when you look at their offseason measured against that. However, that mega move wasn't out there. Like, we campaigned for them even before they made that move, by the way. We thought Draymond Green was a good fit for Sacramento. He clearly wasn't leaving Golden State. And so you need to evaluate, did you really want them to go after a PJ Washington? How gettable was Jeremy Grant when he got the full 5-year boat with a trade kicker and a player option from Portland? The answer is he wasn't gettable. So I have to pull back and say they had a lay of the market. And I don't think, because they renegotiated and extended Sabonis, this was not an issue of, oh, they misread what this cap space was going to do. That actually makes me more concerned about their offseason, because you do not give up first-round equity to make it easier to give an incumbent player an immediate raise. It shows him a solid. You could have just given him a 5-year deal next summer. And if he didn't want to wait for that, if there's something behind the scenes, the threat of him leaving, no. Like, he just had like a great season and the Kings just broke their playoff drought. And 2, it's just like, so you're like him kind of agitating for this renegotiate. I'm not saying he did this, but him agitating towards a renegotiate and extend made you want to keep him around longer. Like, how could this blow up in your face at all? So the fact that I don't believe any of that factored in, I'm just not in the business of giving up first-round picks to make it easier to pay a player that I can just pay anyway next summer, who, when you're looking at it from a team perspective, where was the leverage coming from for him? Like, I don't even know if I love this money. I think his deal will age just fine. He's a very good player. I think they did some nice work on the margins. Chris Duarte is an interesting flyer. I am now smitten with Vezi, who I just think is going to shoot the hell out of it. But it's also sort of like, well, you have all these like forwards who aren't small forwards now with him, Harrison Barnes, even Keegan Murray. Maybe Keegan Murray just makes his on-ball leap and defensive leap, and he showed a lot of it in Summer League and can be more of a wing. I went with just because I don't want to, I'm like still vacillating on this grade a little bit, because I think that some people are going to view it as unfairly harsh. I'm going to go with a D+ here.
Damn it.
Because is that what you went with?
Yeah, it is. I give a D+ too.
I guess you can say, well, what were they going to do with that extra cap space other than pay Sabonis more? And doesn't it make sense? to pay him more now so that you're not paying him a year later into his career. If you want to galaxy brain that, it's fine. Like Reggie Bullock would have helped this team if you wanted to use cap space to do something like that. And you gave up. The other thing is you gave up. I don't care how you feel about Omax. Maybe you would have went a different direction when you drafted Keegan Murray's brother, yada, yada, yada. Like, you gave up a first round pick and you are not a net positive because of it. That was the cost of, let's just say they'll bring Vezi over and you gave him a first round pick to renegotiate and extend Sabonis. That's just how I view this. And I think the other deals were fine. I would saw some people didn't like the Harrison Barnes deal. That like might be the most bankable contract they gave out.
Fine. It's totally fine.
Totally fine. So, and the final thing I'll say is you didn't address like your defensive concerns at all this offseason. I think Nerlens Noel was a pretty good pickup. You leaned further into the offense model. We'll see how that works out for you. But to not upgrade the defense in any way, shape, or form is a choice. Like that is certainly a choice.
Right. I think your approach to the Sabonis extension as being related to, giving up a first and all the asset management stuff. I think that's totally right. I think, but the idea of the Kings not getting better in a meaningful way or in ways that they really clearly needed to is more the angle that I come at it from. And so like, I caught a lot of heat before I tuned it out entirely after like a couple hours. I did a most overrated players in the league, which is an impossible task for BR. I don't know, 3 weeks ago, probably. Because what's overrated mean? By whose standards are we? Like, what's the baseline and what's the consensus opinion? How far from that is the player itself? So ridiculous anyway. Anyway, Sabonis was on there. I ranked him number 1. It was right after this extension. The idea being this guy just got played off the floor by Kevon Looney in a postseason series. While granting that Sabonis was integral to everything the Kings did during the year, a lot of people would say he mattered even more than Fox did, even though Fox was phenomenal in the clutch and I think graded out significantly better by a lot of the catch-alls. Sabonis's, elbow passing and interior play just mattered a ton. It mattered a ton to a team that won 48 games, which it wasn't that long ago that's like 8th seed territory in the West, right? It happened to be much better than that this past season. And a team that could not defend for shit, especially in the playoffs, against a Warriors team that actually, it turns out, was not that great at the time. So they got upset in the first by a team that I think we should have had real questions about. And Sabonis was a massive reason that the Kings did not advance. And he was making 18.5 last year. You're 2xing that as soon as this extension fully kicks in. He's going to make 30. And then you're 3xing that towards the end of this deal on an annual basis. So you've locked in at a max level rate, essentially, a guy that puts a ceiling on how good you can be in the playoffs because he doesn't space the floor, because he doesn't defend in space, because he's severely limited in ways that totally matter if you're trying to win playoff series, which is what the Kings should be trying to do now, right? Because we've advanced, we've ended the playoff drought. What's the next step? The next step cannot be committing massive money to a player who raises your floor but also caps your ceiling. So that's why it's a D+ for me. I think the Kings were in a position where they did not have to feel pressure to do this. They did not have to give Sabonis this money now, and they could have waited. And maybe if they wait, they have other opportunities. They realize after a second year in a row, our defense cannot survive with him at the center of it. We can't give this guy $200 million. So Sabonis is a really good player. He's not the guy that they need in the middle for that amount of money if they want to take the next step. And I'm disappointed ultimately that this feels like, let's keep the gang together because we'd like to win another 45 to 50 games and maybe get out of the first round if we're lucky. Like that's a disappointing result to me, while again conceding that Sabonis mattered and there weren't a ton of other options, but they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to give that big of a deal. So that's a long-winded way. I feel like I have to defend myself a little bit because I've been hard on Sabonis and that contract specifically lately.
And I think you had mentioned it, and so anyone who might have listened to it and already tuned out because of what I said, when I say that they gave up a first to essentially re-sign Sabonis, like you didn't necessarily need to do that because you were slated for cap space anyway. It made it easier to keep Barnes. I believe they used the room exception to sign Vezi. And so like you were able to offload, what was it, between Rashawn Holmes and then technically the Omax pick, like $16.5 million in salary. Mm-hmm. So that took you from, in theory, like 35, 36 million in cap space. Now you're down to 20. And that would have included renouncing Barnes. If you give Barnes his $18 million salary, that's bye-bye cap space. It's just kind of what I meant there. And so like that's why you gave up, because you were able to sign Harrison Barnes and then still have cap space. And you use that cap space on Sabonis's renegotiate and extend on a decision that you could have waited. So I don't think I was clear with those mode of operations, but I think I'm also with you in what you said there. I'm probably higher on Sabonis than you are, but to kind of see how that playoff series unfolded and then decide like, okay, this is the right move. It does feel a little bit unnecessarily, not final, but like concrete.
And I feel bad. I feel like I'm bagging on Sabonis a lot, but it's just like,
there's also something too, and I think fans will, and this will be a fair critique of both of us, like they just had their best season in 2 decades or whatever, and they're good and they can stay good. But if you were going to do this with Sabonis, you needed to then improve your ceiling in the Western Conference. I just don't think they did that. What is their path to being better, more dangerous than they were last year? It's Keegan Murray pops. And maybe he does, but is he going to pop on defense? Which was still, I know they had some pretty good defensive moments in the playoffs.
They did. Their ball pressure was great. That was a real key, but it's not the same as having someone that is going to deter shots at the rim or be able to switch as a bit. Like he just doesn't do. And the other thing I was going to say, the way that Sabonis came up short, what was essentially the book on him. Like this isn't like, we knew this in Indiana. All of these issues were present then. And so then to see it hurt you in the playoffs and then to pay him, I think probably I think you hit it. The Kings had the best season they've had in like 20 years, a little less than that, but that's only a small exaggeration. And I think the vast majority of fans would be like, if we just did that again, if we won in the mid to high 40s again and are a playoff team, give me that for 10 more years. I'm happy. I don't think the urgency to like, let's get into the contender tier. I don't think that's really happening. But the way I think we tend to think about this type of thing is like, well, this can't be the end. The goal can't be to win 48 games. Like that's not how you should be operating.
And I guess, are we shortchanging the fact that the path to improvement could come through Sabonis and Fox? Fox age 26, Sabonis age 27.
Fox for sure. I think Fox was deservedly an All-NBA player and could absolutely get better. But I think we know roughly what Sabonis, like if Sabonis comes out and he's shooting 6 threes a game and he's making like 35% of them, then maybe he's worth that money. Probably not because of the defensive issues he poses, but I kind of feel like he's got such a specific and unique game that it doesn't seem like there's a lot left like untapped. I don't know. Maybe you feel differently.
No. And then just like the other thing here that you have to factor in, I think it goes without saying for the most part, is like you kind of limited yourself now if you want to go out and make a move. And like there are still picks you could trade, but this Sabonis on this deal or this roster makes a lot more sense if there's someone different to put at the 3. Let's say so like, but like you just don't probably have the war chest to get involved in an OG Anunoby sweepstakes at this point, for instance.
Right. And even then, I think this is one of those situations where we're going long on the Kings here, but this is the last thing I'll say. I think they probably, to be the best version or like the next level version of themselves, I think you kind of need a player who's not necessarily better than Fox, but who is better than Sabonis, especially in a playoff context. And now you're theoretically paying a guy that is your third best player in this hypothetical $200 million. Like that's not, this is like a Tobias Harris kind of situation where it's like, you can't spend the resources on this guy if you want to get to, the highest level.
And I think why it could be potentially unexpiring. I'm not saying like they should have not, like you could have just kept him. I'm not even saying that they should have gotten rid of him.
No, not at all.
And that's the problem is like, you want them to continue to get better. The West is going to be harder this year. So there's a chance that they're just worse. Like growth isn't linear. So they could have a worse record, lower seed, and not necessarily be worse. They're still a great team. So I would say last year was not a mirage. And I mean that as like a compliment, but I just don't know their path, how realistic it is now, or what that path even is to getting a lot better. Do you want to take us out here?
Yes, I do. That's a good note to close on. Everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please remember, if you have not already done so, to wherever you consume this podcast, whether it's Apple, whether it's Spotify, whether you watch us on YouTube, rate, review, subscribe, leave comments on YouTube. That's always helpful. If you have followed us every place at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. If you've done all those things, tell your friends, share this however you consume it, so more people can find out about it. Join our Discord. If you want some merch, the link to our TeePublic site is in the YouTube and podcast description. I think that covers it. Thank you again. And we will close, as always, with a shout out to the one and only Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen.